They called him the best husband in Millhaven, Ohio. He coached Little League on Saturdays. He brought his wife flowers on random Tuesdays. He waved at the neighbors with a smile that made them feel safe. But on the morning of September 14, 2019, he reported his wife missing. And in the days that followed, he stood in front of cameras with dry eyes and a carefully practiced tremble in his voice. His name was Daniel Croft. And everything about him, everything was a performance. Welcome back to Arcane Echo True Crime. If you're new here, I cover the cases that haunt you, the ones where the person you least suspect is exactly who did it. Today's story is one I've sat with for a long time before deciding to cover it. Because it's not just a story about murder. It's a story about how a man can wear a mask so convincingly for so long that even the people closest to him never saw what was underneath. This is the story of Daniel Croft and the disappearance of his wife, Rachel. Let's go back to the beginning. Millhaven is a small town about 40 miles southeast of Columbus. The kind of town where everybody knows your car, where the diner on Main Street still has the same menu it had in 1987, where people leave their doors unlocked. Daniel Croft grew up there, married his high school sweetheart, Rachel Haynes, in 2012. They had a daughter, Lily, who was 6 years old at the time of the events we're talking about today. By all accounts, they were the couple of Millhaven. Daniel worked in insurance. Rachel ran a small photography business from home. They went to church on Sundays. Their Christmas card was always the best one on the fridge. But there are things the Christmas card doesn't show. According to friends who later spoke to investigators, the marriage had begun to fracture somewhere around 2017. Rachel had confided in her friend, Nadia Torres, who would later become a key witness, that Daniel had become cold, distant, that he sometimes looked at her like she was an inconvenience. Nadia later said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Rachel described her husband as two different people, the one the world saw and the one who came home. Rachel also had a life insurance policy, $800,000. Daniel was the sole beneficiary. September 14, 2019, a Saturday. At 7:42 in the morning, Daniel Croft called 911. He said his wife was gone. He said he'd woken up and she wasn't in bed, said her car was in the driveway, said her phone was on the kitchen counter. Now, when someone goes missing, there's a protocol. Police take a report, they ask questions, they note behavior. And the responding officers, Deputy Gary Merritt and his partner, Deputy Sue Vance, noted something immediately. Daniel was calm. Not the numb, shock-frozen calm of someone whose brain can't process trauma, the composed calm of someone who had prepared for this conversation. He offered them coffee. When Deputy Merritt later testified, he said, and I'm reading directly from the transcript here, in 22 years on the job, I have never had a husband offer me coffee in the first 5 minutes of reporting his wife missing. Small detail. But in true crime, it's always the small details. Within 48 hours, Millhaven PD had activated a full search. Volunteers spread across the fields east of town. Dogs were brought in. Rachel's photo was everywhere, local news, social media, flyers on every telephone pole. And Daniel gave interviews. He stood in front of cameras looking exactly the way a grieving husband should look, voice breaking at the right moments, mentioning Lily, always mentioning Lily. She's asking where her mama is, I don't know what to tell her. The community rallied around him. Casseroles appeared on his doorstep. People squeezed his hand at church. Meanwhile, investigators were quietly doing something else entirely. They were pulling his phone records. And what they found would unravel everything. Her name was Kristen Sayer. She was 29 years old. She worked at a marketing firm in Columbus. She had been having an affair with Daniel Croft for 14 months. She didn't know he had a daughter. She thought he was separated. When detectives interviewed Kristen, she was genuinely shocked. She handed over every text, every call log, every email without hesitation. And in those messages, they found something chilling. 3 weeks before Rachel disappeared, Daniel had texted Kristen, I'm handling the situation. By October, it'll just be us. I'm handling the situation. He never said Rachel's name. To him, his wife, the mother of his child, was a situation to be handled. Now here's where the investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation. Rachel's body was found 11 days after Daniel's 911 call. She was in a shallow grave in a wooded area about 6 miles from their home, a stretch of land that Daniel's uncle had owned and where Daniel had hunted deer as a teenager. He knew that land. The medical examiner determined cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. And on the floor of Daniel's truck, the one he claimed to have used only for yard work that weekend, investigators found a single strand of Rachel's hair, caught in the door hinge. When forensics processed the truck bed, they found trace amounts of blood, cleaned, bleached, but not well enough. The luminol doesn't lie. And in the garage, behind a shelf of motor oil and old paint cans, a pair of work gloves with Rachel's DNA on them. Daniel Croft had cleaned that garage, but he hadn't cleaned it well enough. He was arrested on October 3, 2019, 19 days after his 911 call. Deputies say he didn't run, didn't fight. He just looked at them and said quietly, deliberately, "I want a lawyer." No tears, no denial, no asking about Lily. The neighbor who watched from across the street said she couldn't believe it. She told a local reporter, "He mowed his lawn 2 days ago, waved at me, he seemed fine." That word keeps coming up in cases like this. Fine. Because people who wear masks that long, they've learned to seem fine. It's the only thing they know how to do. The trial began in March 2021. The prosecution's case was methodical, layered. They started with the marriage, the cracks, the affairs, the life insurance policy. Then came the timeline. Cell tower data placed Daniel's phone exactly 1 mile from where Rachel's body was found, at 11:17 p.m. on the night of September 13th. He had told police he was home all night. His defense attorney argued the cell data was imprecise, that the DNA evidence was contaminated, that Daniel was a grieving father being railroaded by a small-town police force desperate to close a case. The jury didn't buy it. Deliberations took 7 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. When the verdict was read, Daniel sat perfectly still. No reaction. Not a flinch. Rachel's mother, seated in the second row, collapsed into the arms of the woman next to her. And Daniel sat perfectly still. Daniel Croft was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Rachel's sister, Carla, delivered a victim impact statement. She said, and I won't read the whole thing, but there's one line that has stayed with me. Rachel loved you, she made you coffee every morning. She defended you to people who told her something was wrong, and you looked her in the eyes and you chose this. Lily, who was 6 when her mother disappeared, went to live with Rachel's parents. By all accounts, she's doing as well as a child can under the weight of something like this. Kristen Sayer gave an interview 2 years after the trial. She said she still has nightmares, that she replays every conversation looking for what she missed. She said, "He was the most normal person I'd ever met, that's what I can't shake." That's the thing about cases like Daniel Croft's. The horror isn't in the monster. It's in the normalcy. It's in the lawn getting mowed, the wave across the street, the cup of coffee offered to deputies while a wife is already dead. Rachel Hainescroft was 34 years old. She loved hiking, she photographed wildflowers, she had been saving up to take Lily to the Grand Canyon for her 7th birthday. She deserved better. She deserved so much better. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with Rachel's story. I don't take it lightly that these are real lives. Even when names and details are fictionalized for legal and ethical purposes, the patterns are real. The psychology is real. And the pain left behind, that is always real. If this video helped you understand something about manipulation, about the masks people wear, about the red flags we rationalize away, then it was worth making. Leave a comment below, share this with someone who needs to see it. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.